Trump and Xi against Putin. A new world alliance without Russia. Putin is no longer a player, but a pawn in someone else's game. The bunker dweller is out of trump cards. China has distanced itself. Oil no longer saves Moscow. The Kremlin is without influence. The US and China are deciding Ukraine's fate. The Far East is slipping away. Moscow is powerless. I'll tell you all the details in a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. Checkmate for Russia. Trump, after meeting with the Chinese leader, a score of 12 out of 10, tariffs will be reduced and they will work together on the war in Ukraine. A geopolitical upheaval that no one expected. The US and China struck Russia from both sides and threw Putin overboard from global politics. After the first meeting in 6 years between Donald Trump and Xi, it became clear Moscow is no longer a player, but a pawn that was calmly taken off the board. One of the main topics of the talks was the war in Ukraine.
We talked about this for a long time, and we will both work together to see if we can do something. We agree that both sides are currently locked in a struggle. But Xi will help us, and we will work together on Ukraine.
It's especially telling that the issue of Russian oil was barely mentioned. Trump emphasized that they are focused not on raw materials, but on peace. This means that Moscow no longer has its main economic trump card. China, which used to bail out Putin by purchasing energy resources, has effectively stepped aside. We
actually did not focus on oil. We talked about whether we could stop the war together.
Trump called Xi a great leader of a great country and immediately announced a reduction in tariffs on Chinese goods from 20% to 10%. The decision takes effect immediately and opens a new chapter in US-China relations. Beijing and Washington are resuming dialogue, while Russia remains on the sidelines without allies and without influence. Xi emphasized Beijing's readiness to maintain dialogue with Washington and work towards global stability.
China and the US, as major countries, can share responsibility and work together to solve complex global problems. China is ready to continue promoting peaceful negotiations in conflict regions around the world.
The world is changing rapidly. The US and China are forming a new global alliance where the Kremlin is no longer needed. Moscow is losing influence, China is distancing itself, and the fate of the war in Ukraine is being decided without Putin. This is not just a diplomatic blow, it's a geopolitical execution. The US and China have put Russia in its place and rewritten the global game without it. Moreover, Trump is breaking into the heart of Central Asia. The US president is ready to personally meet with the leaders of the 5 countries in the region to discuss trade and investment and security. All of this is under the banner of strengthening America's position in what used to be Moscow's sphere of influence. Russia is watching from the sidelines while Washington strategically sets its geopolitical traps. Central Asia is now in the crosshairs of the US. Trump is ready to play big, and it seems the Kremlin once again finds itself in the role of a spectator. Watch all the details right now.
Donald Trump has invited the leaders of Central Asia to a US summit. The meeting will take place in the C5+1 format in Washington.
So as we can clearly see how the US and China are trying to divide the world while Russia is not being factored into this equation.
On November 6th, the leaders of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan will arrive in the American capital.
The United States of America is trying to strengthen its influence in a region that for many years was considered predominantly a Russian sphere of influence.
It should be noted that Central Asia, squeezed between Russia and China and economically dependent on these 2 major neighboring powers, is trying to balance its foreign policy by declaring a multi-vector approach.
We're talking about important investments, greater access to American markets, and significant energy and technology projects. And of course, cooperation in the field of security. For the countries of Central Asia, this is not just a formal protocol visit. In my opinion, it is truly an opportunity to balance between major centers of power. And none of these states wants to become completely dependent on either Moscow or Beijing. And now they are showing a clear willingness to play a more independent role.
The president of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, has already sent a letter to Trump expressing his sincere gratitude for the invitation and called the meeting timely. Tokayev noted that he shares the main goals of the US president's domestic and foreign policy, in particular the defense of traditional values based on principles of common sense. as well as the American leader's desire to protect peace and security.
He is also actively and persistently trying to seek out and consider various possible alternatives in the realm of foreign policy. And he very clearly and unmistakably understands that if the Russian Federation, under its current leadership, manages to achieve even some of its stated or unstated goals in Ukraine, then Kazakhstan could in fact become one of the next potential victims or targets of the Kremlin's ongoing and aggressive expansionist policy. This awareness shapes his approach to international relations and influences his decisions on the global stage.
It is reported that the invitation to the countries was preceded by the arrival in Central Asia of the U.S. Special Envoy for South and Central Asia, Sergio Gora, and Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau.
I don't think this will be a very quick process. We have to understand that these countries have long been within Russia's sphere of influence, and only recently, China will gradually increase its presence, but the United States of America, given their various and significant capabilities, can, over time, gradually win these countries over. And I think that these countries can position themselves as those actively pursuing a multi-vector policy, seeking to balance their relationships with both major powers.
Of development on the international stage. And let's put it this way, no one will really be able to make any claims against them for that.
This week, members of the U.S. Congress called on Donald Trump to hold a summit this year with the leaders of Central Asian countries in order to advance the United States' strategic goals in the region, including security cooperation, economic ties, soft power, and effective governance. This will be the second summit in this format. The first one took place in 2023 in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly.
Moscow was expecting support, but instead received a cold-blooded blow, a slap in the face from Beijing. Putin's empire is collapsing. Russia is turning into a colony of the Celestial Empire. Beijing is taking everything. China is shifting the balance of power, and Putin has been thrown overboard. All the details are coming up in the report.
China is Russia's main partner, helping it keep its economy afloat and continue the war in Ukraine.
They shouted, "China, well done." Hooray! In Chinese! I
count on maintaining effective and ongoing communications and contacts with President Vladimir Putin in various forms for the sake of dynamic and long-term development of Chinese-Russian relations.
But is that really the case? After all, at the same time, China denies selling weapons or components to Russia, and Chinese banks have stopped transactions with Russia because of sanctions.
Terrorist groups, tens of millions of Chinese soldiers. That would be just what we need right now. And
why do you think so?
Why not?
Why? Do you really think that only soldiers should?
Oh, when I look at the Belgorod region, I can't help but think about just how much we truly lack Chinese.
Very often, we hear official statements from China in which Chinese authorities claim that China has never sold any weapons or military equipment to Russia. Furthermore, China states that it supports the territorial integrity of Ukraine and sincerely wants an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war. Just 3 years ago, propagandists were rejoicing, saying, "Let Western companies leave, we'll buy everything from China."
Now we've bought a truly wonderful, completely Chinese-made car, and honestly, it's absolutely amazing. It's many, many times more affordable and much cheaper than the cars we used to buy before in the past. I bought myself 3 pairs, Gucci shoes, 2,000 rubles each. Wonderful, probably made somewhere in China as well. I hope also here in our country, fake of course. As a matter of principle, I now only buy fakes.
There's no need to even comment on how that turned out. That so-called Chinese support for the Russian economy resulted in the bankruptcy of Russian manufacturers.
And just look at what, for example, the soldiers are driving. What, you think they're driving Russian-made cars? You have to be a real patriot to drive a Patriot. Because it costs a fortune, breaks down all the time, and the spare parts are insanely expensive. That's why the guys drive Chinese vehicles. And now they need motorcycles. Russian ones? No. For some reason, yes, there are very few Russian ones. There aren't any Russian ones at all. That's exactly my point. No, Russian motorcycles simply don't exist. What, you didn't know that?
As for the Russian Federation, if you look at the economic aspects of this issue, they're simply used as a basic sales market. When it comes to things outside of, say, the military industry like civilian engineering, it's practically, as they say, reduced to zero. And Russia has literally turned into a raw materials appendage for China. By the way, Foreign Minister Lavrov came up with a very apt metaphor, calling Putin Xi Jinping's donkey, a donkey for Xi Jinping.
As they say in the East, the guest follows the host's lead. Therefore, the entire agenda, of course, depends on the gracious proposals that the Chinese president and his team made to our president.
Basically, all China needs from an economic standpoint is cheap raw materials. Which, by the way, Russia has in abundance. It's not just gas and oil. It's also lithium, timber, valuable metals, and in fact gold as well, resources that are highly sought after. In other words, all the things that are later used in China itself to manufacture goods for the entire world.
And this situation manifests itself in a wide variety of ways. China has officially approved new geographic maps on which a large part of Russian territory is included. Ussuri Island is recognized as Chinese territory. In fact, the Chinese have already settled huge parts of Siberia and turned the territory into their own colonies.
The Chinese dragon is unlikely to stay within its borders, simply because, by the way, it has certain historical claims to a significant part of our Far East. And that's a fact.
Of course, at first, there was enthusiasm, but gradually it faded, and eventually we all realized that Asina had become a Chinese colony. It's simply a slave-owning enterprise. A slave-owning enterprise, or a prison, call it what you will, where they appoint overseers to keep the workers in line, because the resentment is still there, no matter what. And the workers in Asina even staged a protest called Asina is not China. And they also regularly threaten, saying you won't be able to get a job anywhere in this city. Here's your black mark. So just sit quietly and keep your mouth shut for your 15 to 30,000.
They are very good at waiting. And this ability to wait, even when it comes to the integration of Chinese people into the territory of the Russian Federation, in fact, essentially is already an annexation. Moreover, if you pay attention on some Chinese maps, certain regions of the Russian Federation are already labeled with Chinese names. Well, listen, why would you need to declare war for that? On
Russian television, they are already showing videos about how to find a Chinese husband, and in Russian schools and government institutions, Chinese language is being actively studied. Subtitles.
By Dima Torzok. It is divided into two camps. Those who want to study and those who are skeptical about it and say, why do we need Chinese? We're not planning to go anywhere. I answer them very simply, actually. I say, I'm not teaching you Chinese here, but using the Chinese language to make you think with your head. And that skill will always come in handy.
Putin constantly tries to characterize relations with China as a strong friendship, but China's Xi Jinping literally spat in Putin's face by taking away from Russia that very great victory. And
just yesterday, my friend and representative of the PRC treated me to this Peking duck. Honestly, I'll tell you, there were 2 pieces there, and I thought I'd only eat 1 piece. You know what I mean, right? That's it. But I couldn't resist, I ate the second one too. You see, it was just too delicious.
China and Russia, being the main theaters of military action in World War II, made a decisive contribution to the victory over fascism. And in doing so, they laid the cornerstone of the post-war world order.
China and Russia are neither friends nor partners. And here's what's important. As soon as China has enough motivation to limit its cooperation with the Russian Federation, believe me, it will do so. In Russia, frankly, there is no other choice. Either be friends with China now or face economic collapse and, as a consequence, political, military, and all other kinds of collapse at the same time.
so, it turns out that China isn't helping Russia save its economy or win the war at all, but is simply taking advantage of its weakness to seize its resources and strengthen its own influence in Asia.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
It seems the Far East is slipping out of Moscow's control for good. While the Kremlin is at war, China is extending its economic tentacles. North Korean migrants are changing the region's demographic landscape. Moscow just watches and does nothing. Does this mean the Kremlin will just give it up so easily, the Far East? Or does it have no choice? Find out all the details right now.
Russia is losing the Far East. Not officially, but in reality.
The Far East, without any exaggeration, has become the most important factor in strengthening Russia's position in the world. Our flagship in the new global economic reality.
While the Kremlin is busy with war, the region is quietly being divided with its neighbors, China and North Korea.
I would really call it a sort of creeping takeover, creeping migration. For now, of course, control over the Far East still remains in Moscow's hands, but there are more and more Chinese there, and they are playing an increasingly significant role in the economy. But as they say, today they play a big role in the economy, and tomorrow they'll play a big role in politics.
More than 1 trillion rubles in investments from China. It sounds like help, but it's all centered around trade, and not the development of the region.
China wants to use Russian resources on the cheap, and accordingly they will have that opportunity. And that's why I firmly believe the economic dependence of these regions on China will only continue to grow significantly.
Also, the Chinese have long ceased to be guests in Russia.
The Far East simply isn't needed, so it should just be handed over to the Chinese. That's exactly what they want to do, I'm telling you. The Chinese could just come in and that's it. No one here would resist anymore. There would be no one to resist and nothing to resist with.
According to various estimates, up to 2 million people live from Vladivostok to the Urals.
This is called settling these territories with Chinese people, and in various forms at that. This includes both the migrants themselves and mixed marriages from which children are born. And accordingly, this connection keeps getting stronger and stronger. These regions are becoming increasingly tied to China.
Now about North Korea. In the Far East, just in the past year, more than 15,000 North Koreans have officially arrived and unofficially up to 50,000. And that's not even the limit. A total of 153,000 new labor contracts have already been ordered.
There isn't enough domestic labor in Russia today because so many people have been killed in the war. And accordingly, demographic problems still persist, so yes, there aren't enough of their own people. And in this sense, North Korea is an excellent supplier of labor resources. Because these are disciplined people, and accordingly, they know how to march in step in every sense of the word.
So it turns out that Moscow has handed over the region for temporary use. But why?
We need people who, as he sees it, are easy to control. It doesn't matter, even if not directly, but through intermediaries. That's why he's confident that these people won't start a revolution, won't protest against Moscow's actions. He thinks these are very convenient people, and it would be great if Russia were populated by just such convenient people, unlike with their own people. You never know what could happen.
But everything comes at a price. And the longer the Kremlin turns a blind eye, the more important the question becomes, who is really in control of the Far East?
In reality today, of course, Russia is in many ways considered a vassal state of China, a position which China primarily utilizes in order to exert significant pressure on the countries of Europe. And we clearly understand that this ongoing global confrontation exists, of course, not between Russia and NATO, no, not at all, but rather between China and the United States, China and Europe. In this particular case, we are talking about today's Russia. It's very much like a chained dog, one that obediently follows and obeys all of its master's commands without question.
So, what happens next? Can the Far East still return to Moscow's real control, or is it the other way around? The influence of China and North Korea will only continue to grow.
The influence of China and North Korea will only continue to grow, and accordingly, China itself will decide. Will it need to legally take all this under its own control? Or is it enough to have, let's say, complete economic control today, and tomorrow that will become total control? Political control?
It seems that while Putin is focused on seizing other people's territories, he is gradually losing his own. And what's ironic is that these territories are being taken not even by enemies, but by the Kremlin's own allies. What do you think about the meeting between Xi and Trump? We look forward to your comments. There's more to come, stay tuned for the main news, and don't forget to like. Wishing you peaceful skies above.